So I guess what I was looking at speaking on today, sorry, they're just trying to find a process here. We haven't got a means to do a talk set up or anything. I want to build something. I'm going to take a page out of Pastor Darrell's playbook and stand and give a talk. It's a lot easier for me. I just wanted to look at a couple of points today on our views on success, failure, and victory. And there's generally a process that we employ in our life, and sometimes our processes lead us to success and victory, and sometimes those processes lead us to failure. We take failure very hard in Western society, especially in sort of the North American sort of school of thinking. To fail is to be a horrible thing, and it's very interesting. We take our successes and we put them, we take our certificates and our medals and our trophies and we put them in a place of esteem on the wall. And we try to bury away anything that we failed at, because we don't try to keep it out there so that people can see it. Because for some reason we have this relationship with failure as though it were some terrible thing. So what I wanted to look at today was a little bit of that, and I wanted to look at one particular American success story that I've taken a fair amount of information from through the years. I tried a lot of entrepreneurial endeavors, and it's always very interesting. The first step of entrepreneurship is to have some sort of a mentor, somebody to teach you how something is done. And in the absence of a mentor, somebody, if you don't have somebody to teach you, you have to learn by yourself, and the process is much longer. So I just, without much more speaking about it, I just wanted to read a few points on a very famous American named Milton Hershey. Now you've got several Pennsylvania people there, and Milton Hershey is quite a big success story out of Pennsylvania. But he was born in central Pennsylvania, September 13th, 1857. Not that that really means anything, but sort of puts a time frame in there for you. His father, Henry, who was reputedly possessed with what would be called an entrepreneurial spirit, he moved his family frequently while attempting a variety of business ventures, and he eventually dropped out of the family's lives for the most part, popping in and out on occasion, usually looking for support for his next venture. Now, that sounds as though Henry was a little bit of a, how would you say, absentee father, and in a sense he was. However, Henry himself was actually a very interesting man and worth almost another study at another time. He did an enormous amount once he had achieved some sort of success, and he brought a lot of sort of inventions to light in. They're still in play in central Pennsylvania, mostly to do with agriculture and things like that. He was a very interesting man in his own part, but I wanted to look more at his son, Milton. So you have this scenario where a young boy is growing up for the most part without his father, okay? And he is raised, the next point here, his mother, Fanny, raised him for the most part and instilled in him a strong work ethic, but he also inherited the entrepreneurial spirit from his father. Now, he was only able to achieve a 4th grade education and possess limited skills in reading and writing. He began working at the age of 14 as a printing apprentice at a German-American newspaper. Now, it's very interesting that he would have grown up probably speaking some dialect of German, Pennsylvania Dutch, or the something along those lines. But English wouldn't have been his first and primary language. And it's kind of interesting. So you have a fairly uneducated person without a really strong family makeup, and you sort of look at that as this is a setup for failure. And it's an interesting thing. Our perceptions of situations and how they actually end up is a very key point in the way we do things, because that speaks to something called vision. Vision is a key point when it comes to anything we do in life. So we spoke of a mentorship. We spoke about learning through mentors. We spoke about vision. And vision is really a key point in our ability to use a process towards success or failure. So I'll reread that. He began working at the age of 14 as a printing apprentice at a German-American newspaper in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But he was fired. Now, when you're doing the study on Milton Hershey, there's several reasons that have been credited with him being fired. One of them was that he dropped a tray of the letters that go in the printing press, and his boss lost his mind and fired him on the spot. And the other one is his cap fell into a printing press, but for whatever reason, he was fired from that job, and he had a short career in printing. Now, his mother found him a second apprenticeship with a confectioner, a candy maker named Joseph Royer. And he learned the candy making and ice cream business from 1872 to 1876 with Mr. Royer. Now, at the age of 19, Milton moved to Pennsylvania and started his own candy business. With financial help from his mother and aunt, he began making taffy and caramels, which he made at his shop and then sold them on a push cart. Now, he was taking advantage of the anniversary, I guess, when he moved to Philadelphia. He was taking advantage of something that was going on there, because I guess when he had moved, it was some sort of an anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence or whatever it was. And so he went there with the intention of having a large crowd to cater to. But he basically rented his little shop, bought his equipment, and he was making candy at night, and he was selling during the day. He began making taffy and caramels, and he made at his shop and then sold from a pushcart. And despite long hours, the business scraped by for 6 years. And in 1882, he collapsed under the strain of working day and night and was forced to admit failure, and he closed his shop. Milton then moved to Colorado and joined his father, and he worked for another candy company in Denver, and he learned how to improve the quality of caramel by adding fresh milk. Now, all of these things sort of have a point when you're speaking of Milton Hershey, because Milton Hershey is associated with chocolate, but all of these things brought him to the place where he would eventually discover all of that. He and his father then moved to Chicago and started yet another candy shop that failed as well. And the next move was to New York City, where he worked for another candy business called Heiler and Company, after he went out on his own and started manufacturing under the name of Hershey's Fine Candies. Sugar prices then increased dramatically, and he ended up losing his candy making equipment to creditors in 1885. He then returned to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Now, after so many failures, his family refused to loan him any more money. And this is sort of a point where we can probably sit back and we can sort of say to ourselves, I can associate a point in my life with what happened with Milton Hershey, because quite often having knowledge of how to do something isn't enough. He was a very good candy maker. But the problem was that we need to know more than just that task. Vision comes in at many different things. There's many parts to making something succeed. And we associate a lot of that with the many working parts with something called teamwork. And teamwork is an essential part of what success is about. Now, when you're yourself, I can speak to this. I've been a one-man show. I was a one-man show in carpentry for a long time. And there's a lot of hard lessons that get learned when you work alone. First of all, everything is done by you. You have to do absolutely everything. There's nobody else to help you in the task. And it gets to be too much for any one person to accomplish all of this stuff on a continuous basis. The load gets too heavy to bear. And when we're in a situation where we feel alone and we're in a place where we are not meeting our hopes and our aspirations, not meeting our goals, and we feel like we're failing, it's sort of an interesting place because we get to a very low spot in our life. Now, I'm just going to start to sort of expand on that thought a little bit. Albert Einstein is credited with a quote. He said, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result." Now, Albert Einstein in this quote is quoting about scientific experiments, and that's quite often what happens in science. They will run an experiment continuously looking for some sort of a change that may happen that may be the next great big discovery. But Einstein looked at it in a system of this is insane to do this. But in our lifetime, we constantly apply the same process to what we do. Even though that process may be flawed and failed, we try to accomplish everything on our own. We don't accept the teamwork aspect, and we then reach a point where we fail. Failure, however, itself is one of the greatest teachers that we can have. And that's really, I guess, one of the big points that I wanted to make here, because our relationship with the West, in the West, like I said, we try to bury away our failures and we try to exalt our successes. Our success can only come by failing, as it was. Now, the other part of Einstein is credited for another quote. He also said that the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. Now, at this point in Milton Hershey's life, he actually changed his process. He had failed. He was cut off from his family. They weren't going to give him any more money, and he's on his own. So the first thing he does next is he goes and seeks some consolation from somebody that he used to employ, and he actually forms a partnership with another person. He established a partnership with Henry William Lebkitcher, a man who he had previously employed in Philadelphia. So they got along very well. They made candy very well together, but they were in a position where Milton was the boss and he was the employee. They now become equal partners in a venture. They are able to scrape together enough money to start the Lancaster Caramel Company. Now we start to employ a concept that's called teamwork. Not everything is on Milton's shoulders at this point. They're sharing duties. They're sharing a task. And what happens next, Hershey developed a formula using fresh milk, something that he had learned in Colorado from another mentor. Hershey developed a formula using fresh milk to make Hershey's Crystal A caramels. Finally, finding success as a candy maker, he landed a big order from England. The order was for $2,500. Now, at the turn of last century, that was a huge amount of money. But what we're going to start to discuss is the fact that the sort of dollar figures that Milton Hershey started to deal in would have been astronomical figures at the turn of the last century. So he finally found success as a candy maker. He landed a big order from England, which allowed them to expand their business. Based on the success of his small expansion and the sales he was able, and his new sales, he was able to borrow a whopping $250,000 from the Importers and Traders Bank of New York City. He then opened plants in Mount Joy, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, and Geneva, Illinois, while he also expanded the Lancaster factory, and he was then employing 1,400 people in total. Now, it's an interesting one. Milton attends, the next thing that happens, Milton attends the World Columbian Exposition in Chicago. That was the 400th anniversary of Columbus discovering the New World. And he studied the Swiss and other European chocolate making methods that were there at the World Exposition. He eventually examines and purchases chocolate rolling equipment from J.M. Lehman and Company from Dresden, Germany, and he starts manufacturing cocoa powder, baker's chocolate, and sweet chocolate coatings for his caramels. And after perfecting his formula, he goes on to produce 114 different varieties of chocolates. He then sells the Lancaster Caramel Company to his competitor for $1 million, while retaining the rights to sell them dipping chocolate for caramels. Then he builds a new chocolate factory and continues on to be one of the greatest American success stories in history. Now, Milton Hershey was an interesting man, and it's all very interesting to look at people. And the reason I chose Milton Hershey today was just simply he was a man, just like us. He had the ability to succeed or to fail. He failed several times at something that he was very, very good at, but yet could not find the means to get over the problem of failure. He could see success. He understood what success was, but it eluded him how to achieve it, how to overcome this barrier. And that's a big problem with all of us in our lifetime. We all seem to struggle with one thing or another. But if we have to look at process, we're looking at what made him succeed was the fact that he had mentorship. Somebody taught him how to do this stuff. He employed a new process to his old process, which was teamwork. And then with that teamwork was able to accomplish a lot more because he himself wasn't bearing all the load. And these are all key points to sort of take. I wanted to read just some notable quotes on success and failure that I found. They're all over the internet. These are just really interesting. But one of my favorite ones that I've ever seen, I actually got it out of one of the magazines that I read for pottery. It's called. But the quote is from Robert Louis Stevenson. And it says, "Our business in life is not to succeed, but to fail in good spirits." And this is coming from somebody who's very successful at writing, a Scottish author who wrote several very, very important and prominent books that have been read for the last century and a half. Now, Winston Churchill, the man tasked with directing the Allied forces from the British side during the Second World War, said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." Colin R. Davis, who was a very famous English conductor, said the road to success and to failure are almost exactly the same. Back to Albert Einstein. He also said, "Try not to become a man of success, but rather become a man of value." Back to Winston Churchill again. He's also one of my favorites. I love a lot of his quotes. "Success is walking from failure to failure with no loss of hesitation." And it's one of my favorite ones because the loss of hesitation is something that we all deal with. We hesitate after we've failed. And this is where our fears and our anxieties start to amplify, and we start to have difficulty with the situation because we aren't really sure why we're failing. Because we're good at something, we know we're good at it, we know all of the practical application why we shouldn't fail, but we just can't seem to succeed. Whether it's overcoming something in our walk in the Lord, whether we're seeking our healing, whether we're looking at establishing a new skill, whatever it is, that's the greatest thing of, from failure to failure with no loss of hesitation. Keep going at it, and we will succeed. Michael John Babbitt, an artist, an American artist. I'm not really fond of his art. It's a little challenging for me, but he had a very good quote. He said, "All progress takes place outside of the comfort zone." And that's another one. That's a very key point. And one of the longest quotes of today is from Thomas J. Watson. He was the CEO of IBM. Now, we know IBM was at one time a mover and a shaker in the business world. And I mean, it's morphed into something else right now. But he said, "Would you like me to give you a formula for success? It's quite simple, really. Double your rate of failure." Says you're thinking that failure is an enemy of success, but it isn't at all. You can be discouraged by failure, or you can learn from it. So go ahead, make mistakes, make all you can, because that's where you will find success. Now, we gave just some quotes from other men who are fairly good at what they did. And what I guess it comes down to is the sort of the reality that there's a lot of ways we can sort of see things, but just because we've struggled with something doesn't mean that we won't get through it. And I'm using the example today of Milton Hershey, but I wanted to open up some scriptures today, and we'll just open up in Joshua chapter 1, verse 13. Now, Israel in the Bible is a very good way to look at success and failure. And we use a lot of examples from that sort of illustration of Israel, because Israel was such a good example of how not to do things. There was a lot of successes in Israel's history, but there was an enormous amount of failure. And what it speaks to is the nature that is human. The human nature is a problem that we almost encounter, because the natural man and the spiritual man have different motivations. We have a spiritual man who sees how to do things, but we have a natural man who tends to drag us back to a place where we're applying the old process to. In our relationship with our Creator, We have the best mentor that ever has been. We have the best team builder who can put the right people in the right place, regardless of what we see. We have a team builder who can literally speak into being the heavens and the earth. And he is our mentor as well. How do we do this, Lord? Please show me. Direct my hand, O Lord. Direct my path. If you read the Psalms, a lot of the Psalms, that is the cry from the heart of people going through difficulty. So let's open up in Joshua 1, and we'll just read in verse 1. Now, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise and go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, into the land which I do give them, even to the children of Israel. Every place the sole of your foot should tread upon, that have I given unto you. And as I said unto Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites and the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people thou shalt divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, and do, or that thou may observe and do according to the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. And in the key verse here, in verse 8, this book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe and do according to the work therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. So what the Lord is doing here is giving Joshua not only a pep talk, he's giving him a covenant. And he says, as I was with Moses, I will be with you. You saw what Moses did. Now it's very interesting. Joshua and all of the younger people to this point had only ever known for a short period of their life the slavery in Egypt, and had only known life in the wilderness. God is giving them a vision of what he sees and trying to impart in them how to achieve the vision. He's becoming their mentor in that sense, because these people had no frame of reference whatsoever to base their understanding on. They had never lived in anything but tents. As they wandered through the wilderness, food was provided. They just had to pick it up and eat. Their clothes never before grew old or wore out. The shoes on their feet they had been wearing their whole life. They had never worn out. This was an interesting situation because the children of Israel had no frame of reference to base what they were about to encounter, because they had never encountered it before. So it's like us approaching any situation out of the Bible. The process to them at this point is unclear. So God is saying to Joshua, he's saying, strengthen your people, don't digress from my word, be strong in my word and in my ways. And he says, and also be very courageous. Go out And don't worry about what happens. Do what I tell you, and you will be fine. You will have good success. You will have your all of your needs are met. Don't worry about it. So it's a really, really interesting place for them to be at. And as all of us sort of embarking on what we would pray to be, ministry and trying to get out into the world to preach the gospel to every creature and really hope and pray that somebody takes hold of the things that we're about to speak to them. That's really the interesting part, because we also, most of us anyway, don't have any frame of reference to base that on. We're at the edge of a promised land. We have a vision that God has given unto us, what we could accomplish and what we know in our hearts could be true. However, we have no real frame of reference to base on. How do we do this, Lord? So as he said to Joshua, this book of the law should not depart out of thy mouth. It's not about just speaking it. He says, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe and do according to all that is written therein. It's the doing part. We understand the meditation part. We understand the day and night part, but it's the doing part. That is really the hard part. And this is really where vision comes in. All of our fears, all of our anxieties, our fear of failure, all of the things that happen. And we get back to that simple quote from Winston Churchill, success is walking from failure to failure with no loss of hesitation, because we don't worry about what happened the last time. The last time is irrelevant when we're looking for the next time, because we carry that baggage and we hold on to it. And it's something that holds us back. As Milton Hershey struggled under the process that he was employing, he was a great candy maker. We can all preach. All the people said, we can all preach. We know how. We've got it. We've got the greatest book there's ever been written, and all we have to do is pick it up and read it to people. That's preaching. That's going out and preaching the gospel. There's not much more. There's no complexity to this. We understand that. It's the rest of it that we have trouble with. It's the process in which we employ. So the teamwork aspect is having the mentor that's there, the greatest team leader that has ever been, and we allow then the vision of what we see to be employed in our life and go out and do. This is the hard part, the do. And it's something that I'm just gonna, let's carry on. Joshua chapter 2, we'll just start in verse 1 again. Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out of Shittim the 2 men to spy secretly, saying, go view the land, even Jericho. And they went and came to a harlot's house named Rahab and lodged there. Now, we know all about Rahab, and we know about the situation with her, and she's worthy of another talk another time, because very interesting character, Rahab. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country. And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, bring forth the men that are come unto thee, that are entered into thine house, for they come to search out all the country. And the woman took the 2 men and hid them, and said, thus there came in men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. So I don't know where they came from. I don't know who they were, but they're gone now. And it's sort of this as the story goes. Now, I don't want to get into the whole part of that. We'll zip down to chapter 2 and verse 23, sort of for the sake of time today. So after the whole process is done and they make a little covenant with Rahab the harlot and basically says, you know, if you put that the scarlet thread in your window, we won't harm you. Any of your family that's with you basically won't be harmed, and etc. So in verse 23, the two men returned and descended from the mountain and passed over and came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and told him all things that befell them. And then they said to Joshua, truly the Lord hath delivered into our hands all the land, for all the inhabitants of this country do faint because of us. Now it's very interesting, the emphasis that the two spies are giving. He says, they say to their leader there, Joshua, they say, this is great, okay? These people are terrified of us. But instead of saying, these people are terrified of our God. Because the team leader is the key here. And that's really it. The mentor, the guy who's going to show them what to do, the guy who's going to tell them how to get the process done is the one that should be the one that's being exalted as the fearful force, not themselves. And you start to see already as you sort of go through the next period of time where they come to, they get past Jericho to Ai, and they end up running into problems there. Now, we're going to talk about Jericho specifically today, but there's so much to read, and this is worth a really good Bible study. It's always a good read. We'll go down to chapter 3 and verse 12. So, of course, they cross the Jordan, and they're here, and this is all sort of key points. It came to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests that bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest on the waters of Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from the waters that come down from above, and they shall stand on a heap. And it came to pass, when the people moved from their tents to pass over the Jordan, that the priests bearing the ark and the covenant before the people, and they all bear the ark, which were come into Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, for the Jordan overfloweth all the banks at that time, at the time of the harvest. And the waters which came down from above stood and rose upon a heap very far from the city, Adam, that was beside Zaratan, and those came down toward the sea of the plain. Even the sea failed and were cut off, and the people passed over right against Jericho. And the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all the Israelites passed over on dry ground, all the people which were passed clean over the Jordan. Now, I wanted to just read this part here because this is why the inhabitants of the land are fearful of these people. This is why the people of this land are so fearful of the situation, is because they have a miracle working God in their midst who can do things like this, who allow they didn't have to build boats. They didn't have to ford the river, and get wet up to here and risk their lives or any of that stuff. They have a God who says, I will send you through that river dry shod on ground. Your feet won't even be muddy when you're done. That's why the people of the land fear them. And it's this is the stuff that our sister was talking about in her testimony. When you run into people who have the miracle working God on their side, and they're not just spouting religion, and they're not just spouting a bunch of meaningless words that have absolutely no power, when we have the miracle working God on our side, people see a difference in the approach. And it's something that all of us were affected by. And the desire to have that in our life, as our sister explained, is a very big motivation. And that's really why we don't have to worry about the do aspect that we were talking about earlier, because we have the how aspect right behind us and above us and in our hands. Mm-hmm. And that's the the most important part of what we have here as a fellowship. The doctrine is from here. And that's really it. And anything that isn't in here, we don't do. And we heed all the warnings that are there. And that's really it. So the people of Israel and us have very similar sort of motivations. Now let's go to chapter 4, verse 14. And I'm just going to read one verse here, and then we'll go into the basic Jericho story. So after they had passed through, they into the plains of Jericho. They're now in verse 14. On that day, the Lord magnified Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they feared him as they had feared Moses all the days of his life. And the only reason they feared him was simply because God was standing behind him. And that as God had given him this covenant, as I was with Moses, so shall I be with thee. And there's plenty of verses in the New Testament that are very similar to that. And the term fear means to be respectful, to respect him. Now, Joshua chapter 6 and verse 1. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus thou shalt do 6 days. And the 7 priests shall bear before the ark of the Lord 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And on the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall come to pass, when they shall make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye shall hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat. And the people shall ascend up every man straight before him. And Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said unto them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, Pass on, and compass the city, and let none that is armed pass on before the ark of the Lord. And it shall come to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns passed on before the Lord, and blew with the trumpets of the ark of the covenant of the Lord following them. Sorry, dog's making noise. And the armed men went before the trumpets, or before the priests that blew the trumpets, and the rearward came up after the ark, the priests going on, blowing with the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your feet, with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth until I bid you to shout, then you shall shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going on about it once. Then it came to the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua arose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, and the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew with trumpets, and the armed men went before them, but the rearward came up after the ark of the Lord, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And on the 2nd day they compassed the city once and returned to the camp. So they did 6 days. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they arose early and drawing off the day, compassed the city after the same manner, 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass that the 7th time, when the priests blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, Shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. And the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein, to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in her house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And ye, if in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourselves accursed when you take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble it. But of all the silver and all the gold and the vessels of brass and iron that are consecrated unto the Lord, they shall come into the treasury of the Lord. And so the people shouted when the priest blew with the trumpets. And it came to pass, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. And they utterly destroyed all that were in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox, sheep, and ass, with the edge of the sword. Of course, then we get to Rahab the harlot. So we could continue to read on. But the very fundamental fact of the story of Jericho is such a very vibrant one in the way it's done. Because there's a process that God gave them to do, very specific process, go around the city once every day. And you can imagine what was going on in the hearts and the minds of all the people inside of Jericho. Oh, they're at it again, are they? What are they doing? Why are they blowing the trumpets? It's getting on my nerves. And then at the end of all of this process on the seventh day, they do this 7 times. And why? This isn't stopping. Why isn't this stopping? But the testimony was there. The people of God were there, and the people inside the city feared it. Now, if we can turn that into our situation right now, and if we put ourselves in the position where Israel was, and we go into speak to the people of this world, and the whole point is we no longer have carnal weapons to fight with. We have spiritual weapons. As we sing in the chorus, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty to the pulling down of strongholds through the Holy Ghost. The idea that we go into this world to preach the gospel to every creature is one that somehow intimidates us. But as there was a process with Jericho, and as Joshua reminded the children of Israel, when you go into Jericho and when you actually take the city, don't get carried into any of the stuff that they've done. Everything that they have is accursed. Don't touch it. And it's the same warning in the world. Stay away from the worldly items. Stay away from all of that stuff. But Jericho represents everything that has ever been in our way. It represents the thing that is in our way in a spiritual sense of every victory that we've ever had, or every failure that we've ever had. It represents something in us that we have to give ourselves up to God's process in order to have success. So it's all about vision, team building, listening to your mentor, and your team leader. And that's really it in a nutshell. It's a relatively simple thing. And if we fail, we don't fear the next one, because we know eventually the situation is going to get better. We will continue. I love the story and the illustration of Jericho, because God gave through Joshua a commandment not to speak while all of this was going on. Don't talk to each other. Don't get into each other's ears. Don't wonder why this possibly won't work. Don't use any of the baggage from the past to influence what's going to happen in the future. He says, be silent for this whole process. Listen to me and be silent. Just do it. Don't talk about it amongst yourselves, because you could potentially talk yourselves out of the whole victory of it. And I love that aspect of the whole account of Jericho, because when they shouted and God said the walls fell down flat, you probably could have heard a pin drop, because it actually worked. So they're in a situation of miraculous. The people are fearing them, and they go on to great renown in the area because they had their God. We'll continue on and we'll conclude in Mark chapter 16. So I just wanted to sort of recap a couple of the points, and I think I might have just recapped them, but I might have to say them again. Success in anything requires the effort. We must do the work that we're assigned. Understanding and our lack of knowledge about how to do that something doesn't limit our outcome. That's where our fears and anxieties play on, but it does not limit our outcome. Teamwork is essential to the success of any effort. The ability to learn from mistakes, either our own or by others, gives us an advantage. And that's what they call wisdom and true wisdom, the ability to learn by our mistakes. Being part of a team is a vision-based activity, and we help each other and other members to stay focused on what's important, our goal. And of course, the greatest team leader we have is God. And if God be for us, who can be against us? So we'll just conclude in Mark chapter 16. We'll pick it up in verse 9. Now, when Jesus was risen early from the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. And she went and told them that had been with them, and as they mourned and wept. Now, here we are. We're at a situation where a group of people that had been with Jesus are thinking failure. Now what? Now what do we do? Look at that. We followed him all of this way, and he's dead now. What do we do? In verse 11, and they, when they had heard that he was alive and had been seen of her, believed not. Bringing their baggage in, old frame of reference. They'd never known the life of miracles. They had never understood what Jesus' whole point of being was actually there for. Jesus came not to deliver them from the Romans, as they thought, but Jesus came to deliver them from the Romans by giving them salvation. He would deliver them from the whole world, not just from their immediate situation. They didn't believe Mary that he had risen. Verse 12, after that he appeared in another form unto 2 of them as they walked and went into the country, and they went and told it to the residue, neither believed they them. Jesus appeared a second time. Still didn't believe it. Afterward he appeared unto the 11 as they sat at meat, and upbraided them for with their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they believed not them which had seen him after he was risen. And this is sort of a hard lesson for the disciples. And again, they had no frame of reference as to what was going to happen. Jesus had been with them and taught them all these things. And it wasn't until later, once they received the Holy Ghost, that all of those things were brought to remembrance. Our sister gave her testimony about praying and all of that stuff, that she was trying to become a good person. And this is a point where a lot of people are in their life. And why is it that we have a hard time going out and speaking to them, or feel it's for some reason we can't just bring ourselves to just say to the whole world, I'm a spirit-filled Christian, and Jesus Christ is alive and well, and he's risen, and he sits exclusively on the right hand of the Father, and he's going to fill you with the Holy Ghost and fire, and you are going to change your life, or the Lord is going to change your life. Your entire life will be changed. Why is it that we find that such a difficult thing to do? I don't know. It's an interesting one. But once we get into the rhythm of it, and we get into the routine of it, and we speak literally to every person. I know Pastor Pete Visser used to work on what was called the law of averages. He used to say basically it took 1,500 pamphlets to get one person to a meeting, and out of 100 people that came to a meeting, I think he said it was about 3 that stuck. So you do the math, and basically he said, tell everybody, just go out all the time and tell everybody. And you see the different approaches in the world. You had Pastor Esteves in Brazil had a great approach. He had a different approach than Pastor Pete Visser. He says, I want you to go out and witness to and mentor one person and get that person in. So he said, I just want you to duplicate yourself this year. And he gave that task to every person in the fellowship. And what happened was that the fellowship for several years in a row doubled, because it wasn't based on the law of averages. It was based on a much more personal approach. So process is not something that we can say there's only one. But God will give us the ability to know how to attack Jericho from the place we stand. And that's really what it's about. It's about the knowledge of where we stand today, and he has the knowledge of how we can succeed. We do not have the knowledge. We don't have the frame of reference, just as the disciples here didn't have the frame of reference before they became apostles eventually. Verse 14 again, and as they appeared unto the 11, as they sat at meat, and upbraided them for their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they believed not them which they had seen after he was risen. And he said unto them, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And he said, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned or condemned. And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils, they shall speak with new tongues. And if they take up serpents, they shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, they shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. So after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven, and he sat at the right hand of God. And they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them, confirming the word with signs following. Amen. And that's one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible. The Lord working with them. As individuals, we can do very little. But as a team, with God as our leader and as us going out and following the instructions that he gives us, being strong and very courageous, we shall have good success. Those are sort of the things to be taken from today's talk. It's a rather simple talk today, but it was just a very interesting little bit of a study on all of the things that we have in our own individual processes. God's objective through all of this is, as Jesus was standing there talking to the people, basically what the disciples were asked to do. You're not scoring right now. This goal isn't going to happen. So what God does is he moves the goalpost. It's what he does. He moves the entire goalpost. We have a different focus. We have a different idea. And that's what God does for everybody that we preach the gospel to. He moves the goalpost, because our brother Carlton's testimony recently was very good in that he was very caught up in his career, but nothing fulfilled him. And I mean, that sounds familiar to all of us. That's what God does for us. He moves the goalpost so that we actually then have a different target to aim at. And it's something that fulfills us and gives us more than just a peace of mind. It gives us an identity. We become Christians. We become anointed ones, disciplined ones, disciples of Jesus Christ. We become all of those things, those attributes that the Bible gives unto men, we become. And that's a phenomenal thing. Our life changes, as our sister testified today. And that's something that has an impact. We go into this world, as Israel went into Jericho, people fearing or respecting at least what we have to say, because we're not just spouting words. We have God standing right behind us. And that's the thing that drives us forward. And I'll just leave it there. Praise the Lord.